Awesome. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, Victor. I'm so excited to be here today to talk about undergraduate applications to the United States. And we are going to dive in and get through all kinds of information. We should have time at the end of this presentation to answer questions and all of that. So please write those down and you'll be able to put those in the chat that we can respond to. And let's get started. So I know that thinking about coming to study at a US institution seems a little daunting. It can be a little nerve-wracking, especially thinking about flying across the world and going to study someplace you've never been before. It's all about the right fit university for you. There are thousands of universities and in the United States, and they all have different aspects that align specifically with their students and the desires of those students, their lifestyles, and what they're trying to achieve. So you have to think about things like the location. Where do you envision yourself living, for 4 years, which is a typical length of a bachelor's degree in the United States? You also need to think about the value of your study, what you want to get out of it, what kinds of resources and support that you want to have and be able to, have access to. Also, campus life. For example, I did not go to a very big university. And that was nice for me because I also worked 3 jobs while I was studying. A lot of students, at the University of Arizona have a very different perspective than what I experienced. And so, those movies about going to a U.S. college and the whole environment and all the different things that they get to do. That is definitely something that you can achieve and be a part of at bigger institutions, such as the University of Arizona or other big institutions that have a big student population. So there's a lot of different cultural aspects that you want to take into consideration. For example, at the University of Arizona, we're very close to the Mexican border. So we have a lot of Mexican influence. We also have representation of over 120 countries in our student population. So if you want to be a part of something that's really big like that, then definitely a big university might be for you. Otherwise, there are other universities that might have a smaller population. Maybe they have a greater population of, your country and things like that. So there's a lot to consider when you are wanting to study in the US. You also want to consider what program it is that you want to pursue. The major is the primary study. Your minor is the specialization within that study. And then there's also areas of concentration. So, for example, I have a degree in business administration with a specialization in international management and a concentration in management. So, it can get really detailed and all of that. And many students will change their major at least one time during their studies. That is something that is very common in the United States. So, you may, get into your classes and you think that you're going to study biology, and then you realize that you don't actually like biology. That's okay. That's what those first 2 years of education at a US university or college are for, so that you can kind of get your feet wet and understand, the 101 basics of the whatever it is that you think that you want to study. So don't worry if you change your mind. I actually have a colleague that changed her major 5 times before she graduated. I don't recommend that, obviously, but it is possible. You need to seriously think about what interests you. I know that there's always a lot of pressure from, family and relatives and, what you see in media and movies and all of that. So you have to determine what truly interests you. Do you have a hobby that you love? Who influences you? Do you have a hero that you want to look up to and become something like that someday? And what is your passion? I know that these questions are very American, and that is something that you have to kind of understand culturally if you're considering coming to the US to study. So, your interests are super important. And in general, what I like to tell students is, where do you want to be in 50 years? I know that's a really hard question to answer, but it is a very important question to answer. What kind of career do you want to have? Do you want to work inside or outside? Do you want to work in a hospital or maybe a clinic? Do you want to work in a school? I mean, there's so many spaces, and you really want to think about that as you are going through your interests and trying to decide what to study. Most majors prepare you for multiple career paths. So, like my example of studying business, I did not think that I would ever be really in higher education, but it turns out I love it. It took me a lot of different paths and a lot of different jobs to figure that out. Picking a major is not the same as picking a job. Your major can be broad, and it can be applicable to so many different things. So definitely keep that in mind. Location is a big part of deciding where you want to study in the United States. The US is a massive country with 50 states, and each state is different. It's awesome, honestly. I think of it as little countries that are all a little bit different, but a lot of it the same. So, when you're thinking about where you want to study, you need to think geographically. Where do you want to be? Do you like big cities? Do you like the rural countryside? Do you like smaller towns? What environment do you want to be in? Do you like the snow? Do you like the heat? Do you want to be by the beach or mountains? There are all these things to consider, and it can be a little overwhelming, but I recommend taking a look at a map, maybe searching, universities that have programs that interest you and going from there. Looking up the cities where the universities are and really trying to do your research before you decide which schools to apply to. Choosing a type of school can also be really confusing. There's public institutions and private institutions. So, a lot of private institutions do have more scholarships, but that really depends on the institution. A lot of private institutions also are really specific to their areas of study. Public institutions have definitely a lot more broad areas of study, and they are typically funded more by state and federal governments in the US. Also, do you want to be part of a research institution or maybe a liberal arts institution? So, for example, the University of Arizona is a research institution. So, we basically get money from the government and lots of organizations to do research. Undergraduate and graduate level students get to dabble into that. Liberal arts institutions have a little bit of a different approach, and that might be something that interests you if you're interested in something like studying English or communication. You have to kind of take a look at what those schools offer you. There are also 2-year institutions, like a community college, and there are 4-year institutions, like a big university. So you definitely want to take a look at all of those options. And if it gets a little overwhelming, talk to an Education USA advisor. They are super helpful, and they are experts in helping students navigate through all of those options and helping you find the best fit for you. You probably think also, do rankings matter? Do I want to go to an institution that is a top 1%, like the University of Arizona? Some factors to consider when you are thinking about rankings is the reputation of the university, what kind of research they're doing and things that they're dabbling into, what programs they offer, and the support within those programs that will enable you to be successful when you graduate and have a career. Some factors that are not included when you're thinking about rankings: what you'll learn beyond grades, campus diversity, how much you love the city, the emotional support that you'll receive, and the friendships that you're going to make. I think the most exciting part about going to university is you find people that are like you. You find people that are in that niche. I don't know about you, but when I was growing up, I was a little weird. But when I went to university, I met people that were like me, that had the same questions that I did, that wanted to talk about the same things that I do. And it's a really awesome space to develop yourself and learn from others and make lasting friendships. So, ranking institutions are not always the best fit for you. You have to think about what you want, and the choices, are endless. So, like I said, talk to an Education USA advisor, or reach out to a school representative if you're interested in a specific institution. We're all here to help. What makes a university selective? So we know, for example, the Ivy League schools are very selective. You could apply and be a perfect student and still not get in. They have, their reputation to uphold. They also have a number of available seats each year that they can fill. So, for Harvard, I'm sure they get tens of thousands of applications, but only, maybe a couple of thousand seats that they can fill. So that makes it a very selective school. Also, financial aid and scholarships are a big part of it too. You need to be proactive when you are wanting to apply for a US institution, if you are wanting to be considered for financial aid and scholarships. There are typically deadlines that are associated with those scholarship considerations that are before the final deadline of applying. So be sure that you do your research so that you can be considered for that funding. There are different types of admission reviews as well. There's all kinds of different reviewing processes, including holistic, like the University of Arizona, where we take into consideration not just your grades, but also your personal statement, things like your recommendation letters and all of that. There's also the academic comprehensive programs. So if you're applying for something like engineering or nursing, they definitely want to see that you have already received an education in things like calculus. So that way you will be set up for success when you're taking those really hard engineering or nursing classes. Guaranteed admission is also a thing with some universities. So those are universities that you should definitely consider adding to your portfolio of all the types of universities that you are wanting to apply to, because you should always have a backup plan. Basically, the point is start early, plan ahead, and know the application requirements. Application packages require a great deal of preparation and planning. So you really, really need to be proactive. In the US, application requirements are different depending on the institution. We just went through all the different types of institutions and different formats for those schools: research institutions versus liberal arts, holistic review versus comprehensive academic review, and things like that. So you should definitely take the time to do your research and figure out what is the best fit for you. Some general application requirements include your education credentials. So they will want to see your secondary or high school diploma and transcripts, as well as any final national exams required in your country. They'll want to see official transcripts sent directly from your institution to the school you are applying for. And if they are not in English, they will also require certified English translations. So that can take some time too to get all of those translated. Also, Standardized test scores, things like English proficiency is a big thing for international students. So definitely you'll want to take a look at what English tests they approve for the school you are looking at and the test scores that are required so that you are prepared and you take the right tests and you get the right level of English that you can prove. Also, your essay and personal statement are important. You don't necessarily have to include that always, but I highly recommend it because when you're submitting an application to an institution, they want to have a whole picture of who you are. They don't want to necessarily just base you off of your grades. So tell them your story. Tell them what interests you, why you picked the institution, and what you want to gain out of the education from that specific school so that you can achieve the career that you want. Here is an example for the University of Arizona if you are applying directly to a university. So you would go to their international student website specifically because it's probably different than the domestic student website. So our website for international students is everywhere.arizona.edu. And we have our specific deadlines. So for fall, it would be May 1st, for spring, November 1st. You would complete the application that's in the on the website. You click the apply now button, create an account, create an application, and all of that. And then once you have successfully submitted your application, you would provide your academic transcripts. You would send your English proficiency scores officially. So for example, if you take the TOEFL, you would request that the TOEFL send your scores directly to that university. And most institutions will require payment of an application fee when you are applying directly to that institution. That fee typically cannot be waived because that goes toward the team that is processing all of your documents, issuing the decisions, and things like that. So these are all things that you should keep in mind. If you are applying directly to a university, that is a serious commitment and you're really focusing on one institution. There's also what we call the Common App. The Common App is a website that's free for students. You can go in and create your profile and apply for multiple colleges at one time. There are tens of thousands of colleges listed in the Common App. Some institutions are not on the Common App, so you definitely want to take that into consideration. If you're really looking at a specific school that is not on the Common App, then you will have to apply directly to that school. Also, some schools will only accept the Common application for a specific term. So, for example, the University of Arizona only accepts Common applications for the fall term. If you are wanting to, for example, come to the University of Arizona starting this January, you would have to apply directly to our institution, not through the Common App. So, like I said before, you need to be proactive, create your profile, navigate through the website, and add the colleges to your list that you are wanting to apply to. Gather your requirements, and then submit those applications. Filling out your application takes time, so don't rush through it because you definitely want to make sure that you are submitting all the materials that the schools need, that you are really taking the time to answer all of the questions and being thoughtful about the whole process so that you can tell the best story for yourself. You will need to gather materials, create your account, add colleges, check in with your school counselor because they can also be a part of adding your transcripts for you. You can submit a request to have application fees waived based on, your financial situation. And your counselor can go in and approve that and say, yes, this student needs those fee waivers. Some schools will allow that and just waive the fee. Some schools do still require the fee, so you definitely want to make sure that you're checking once you have submitted the Common App to, let's say, 5 schools. You're going to have profiles in each of those schools on their websites that you'll want to check and make sure that they've got all of the information that they need. If they do require the application fee, you'll be able to see in your profile what that is and all of that. Essays are also typically a big part of applying to some institutions. I know that some institutions ask questions such as, you know, what what do you want to achieve in your career, and who is your hero and why? So you should definitely take the time to research those kinds of questions. Think critically about your answers and provide very full answers in those essays. Take your time when you are writing those. Have a second person look at it and give you some critiques. It's always good to get a second pair of eyes before you submit an application. Reach schools are colleges where you have less than 15% chance of admission. Those are really competitive schools. So you should set your expectations a little bit low for those because you may not meet the grades or test scores or the extracurricular activities that they're requiring. Schools such as Ivy Leagues, Harvard, Stanford, Yale, those are highly competitive schools. There are also target schools, which are colleges where you have a 15 to 70% chance of admission. So you have a good chance if you meet the admission requirements. Those admission requirements are always listed on their websites. And like I said, there's probably a specific website for international students. And if you're confused, reach out to a school representative, reach out to an Education USA advisor. They are definitely there to help you navigate through all of that information. There are also what we call safety schools. Those are colleges where you have a greater than 70% chance of acceptance. You should definitely feel excited about the fact that there are so many options for you and consider all of these options when you are looking at schools that you want to apply to. You should definitely apply broadly. Put your name out there. There's no fear in it. You know what I mean? If you want to apply to Harvard, do it because you never know. You miss 100% of the chances you don't take. So keep that in mind. Also, be proactive and do your research. If you're applying to a reach school, make sure you're applying to other schools that meet your academic profile as well. You want to be taking a look at what financial aid and scholarship competitiveness they have, what funding they offer. Some schools do offer full funding, some do not. So definitely keep that in mind as well. Sometimes they have unpredictable admission reviewing. So you definitely want to keep all of that in mind and check on your applications once you have submitted them. Apply broadly to avoid wait lists and make sure that you are applying by the earliest deadline possible so that you can be considered more greatly. And limit your number of applications. I know that you think maybe I'll apply to 20 schools. Really take a look at those schools and think about, do you really want to go to them? Because it can be really stressful if you get admitted into, say, 10 schools and then you have to decide which school you want to go to. So really take a look at those. I say maybe 5 tops and help yourself out, because if you do get into all those institutions, making those decisions can be really hard. Always have a backup plan too. So I know that maybe you are a really active student, you have perfect grades, and you want to apply to a big Ivy League schools only. Make sure you have a backup plan because those are really competitive institutions, and you want to make sure that you are setting yourself up for success as best you can. Once you get your offer, the first thing I always say is celebrate because you did it. You got into a US institution. Look at you go. You are going places. You're a world traveler in training. And that is something really exciting. Go out and have dinner with your family. Share all of this with your family and friends. That's amazing. You will want to look at all of your different offers, determine the value of your scholarship awarded versus the overall cost of the institution. Like I said, some institutions will allow full scholarships, some do not offer those. Also, look for other funding opportunities when you are a continuing student, so that second, third, or fourth year. On-campus job options, food, and the different accessible things that students can have. For example, at the University of Arizona, we have all kinds of different restaurants. We are a UNESCO city of gastronomy, so we are known for our food and the fact that we have food from all over the world. Take that into consideration, because maybe you're going to be missing your mom's cooking and you want to be able to go to a store and at least buy the things that remind you of home. It won't be as good as your mom's cooking, but it'll be close. Also, choose the best offer based upon your criteria and financial situation. And accept the offer that you are wanting and make sure that you are declining the offers that you are not intending to pursue. You will need to prepare to provide financial documents to apply for a student visa. So you want to keep that in mind as well. And make sure that you are deciding by what we call the National Decision Day, which is May 1st. So that's for fall students, students that intend to start in August, September. I know that was a ton of information, and I hope that this really gave you some perspective on where to go from here, how to get started, and what to think about when you are wanting to apply to a US institution. I am so excited that I get to share this information with you, and I am really glad that Education USA is a valuable tool that you can access to help you navigate through all of those nuances and help you to feel proactive and ready when you want to apply to a US institution. Go ahead and put your questions into the chat if you want to ask any questions.